The bitter wind howled across the frozen plains of North Dakota as the first light of dawn illuminated a lone figure stumbling through knee-deep snow. Her lips had turned blue, her thin dress offering no protection against the merciless December morning of 1878. Hope Addison hadn't expected to arrive in Fargo this way barefoot, half frozen, and at the mercy of whoever might find her before the winter claimed her life. Hunter Zimmerman woke with a start, his instincts honed from years on the frontier alerting him to something unusual. Pulling back the heavy curtain of his cabin window, he squinted against the glare of fresh snow. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. A woman, barely visible through the swirling flakes, was collapsing at the edge of his property. Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat and boots, not bothering with his hat as he rushed into the frigid morning. Miss, can you hear me?" Hunter called out as he trudged through the snow. When he reached her, he found her conscious but barely so, her eyelids fluttering as she tried to focus on his face. Most alarming were her bare feet, an angry red against the white landscape. "Good Lord, how long have you been out here?" Her voice came as a whisper. "Train. Robbers took everything." Hunter didn't wait for more explanation. He scooped her into his arms, noting how little she weighed, and turned back toward his cabin. "I've got you now. You're going to be all right." The woman shivered violently against his chest as he carried her through the snow. His cabin came into view, modest but sturdy, smoke still rising from the chimney. Inside was warmth, safety. "My name's Hunter," he said, trying to keep her conscious. "Hunter Zimmerman. What's yours?" "Hope," she managed through chattering teeth. "Hope Addison." "Well, Miss Addison, you picked a mighty cold day to come visiting Fargo," he said with forced lightness, pushing open his door with his shoulder. The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, a small kitchen area occupied another, and a curtained-off sleeping area stood in the corner. Hunter gently placed Hope on a chair near the crackling fire, then quickly gathered blankets from his bed. "These clothes are soaked through," he said matter-of-factly. "I'll turn my back and you wrap yourself in these blankets. I've got some spare clothes that'll be too big but dry." Hope nodded weakly, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and wariness. Hunter respectfully turned away, busying himself with stoking the fire and preparing coffee while she changed behind him. "I'm decent," she finally said, her voice slightly stronger. Hunter turned to find her huddled in his blankets, her wet clothes in a heap beside her. Her dark hair had fallen loose around her shoulders, framing a face that, despite its current pallor, was strikingly beautiful. But it was her feet that demanded immediate attention, angry red with patches turning worryingly white. "Those feet need tending right away," he said, pulling a chair to sit across from her. He placed a basin of warmed water on the floor between them. "May I?" Hope hesitated only briefly before nodding, extending her feet from beneath the blanket. Hunter gently took her right foot in his hands, his weathered palms enveloping her icy skin. He had tended to frostbite before on himself and others, and knew the danger she was in. "This might hurt some," he warned, slowly submerging her foot in the tepid water. When she gasped, he immediately stopped. "Too much." "No," she said through gritted teeth. "Please continue." Hunter worked methodically, warming her feet gradually to avoid the searing pain of too rapid reheating. His large hands cradled her foot, fingers moving in gentle circular motions to restore circulation. The intimacy of the act wasn't lost on either of them, a stranger touching her in such a familiar way, but survival trumped propriety in the unforgiving Dakota territory. "You've got good color coming back," he observed after some time. "That's promising." He patted her foot dry with a clean cloth, then took the other one in his hands, repeating the process. How did you come to be wandering barefoot in a snowstorm, Miss Addison? Hope's eyes drifted to the window, where snow continued to fall heavily. I was coming from Philadelphia to meet my uncle in Bismarck. He's my only family now. Her voice caught slightly. The train stopped in Fargo because of the storm. I was staying at the hotel in town when men broke in. They took everything, my shoes, my coat, my money. Hunter's expression darkened. The Harmon gang, most likely. They've been terrorizing the area for months. They said they'd come back, she continued, shuddering at the memory. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, just away from them. Hunter nodded, understanding her desperation. You're miles from town now, must have been running for hours. I don't remember much, she admitted. Just cold, so much cold. Hunter finished warming her second foot, noting with relief that both now showed healthy pink color returning. He retrieved a pair of thick wool socks from his dresser. These will help, he said, carefully sliding them onto her feet. They were comically large on her but would keep her warm. Hungry? Hope nodded eagerly, and Hunter set about preparing a simple meal of beans, bacon, and biscuits left from the previous night. The aroma filled the small cabin, and Hope's stomach rumbled audibly. Your uncle in Bismarck, Hunter said as he worked. What's his name? Maybe I know him. Elijah Addison, Hope replied. He's a physician. Hunter nodded. Don't know him personally, but I've heard the name. Supposed to be a good doctor. He served the food on tin plates, handing one to Hope along with a steaming mug of coffee. She ate with a restraint that spoke of good breeding despite her obvious hunger. This storm won't let up for days, Hunter said, glancing out the window again. Telegraph lines are likely down. No way to let your uncle know you're safe. Hope's face fell. He'll be worried sick. First chance we get, I'll ride into town and send word, Hunter promised. For now, you need rest. You can take the bed, I'll sleep by the fire. Hope began to protest, but exhaustion was rapidly overtaking her. Hunter helped her to the bed, pulling the curtain for privacy. Within minutes, her steady breathing told him she had fallen asleep. Hunter settled into his chair by the fire, cleaning his rifle more out of habit than necessity. The unexpected arrival of Hope Addison had disrupted his solitary existence. But as he listened to her quiet breathing from behind the curtain, he found he didn't mind the company. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white silence. Hope slept for nearly 14 hours straight, her body recovering from the ordeal. Hunter kept the fire well stoked and occupied himself with mending tack and reading one of the few books he owned, a worn copy of The Last of the Mohicans. Occasionally, he checked on his guest, reassuring himself with the healthy color that had returned to her face. When she finally stirred, the winter sun was already setting on her first day at the cabin. What time is it? She asked, her voice thick with sleep as she emerged from behind the curtain, still wrapped in his blanket. Nearly 5, Hunter replied, setting down his book. How are you feeling? Hope took stock of herself. Better, much better. She wiggled her toes experimentally. My feet are sore but not painful. Good, you're lucky caught the frostbite early enough. Hunter moved to the stove. Hungry, famished, she admitted. As Hunter prepared a more substantial meal than before venison stew that had been simmering all day, Hope took in her surroundings properly for the first time. The cabin was simple, but unexpectedly neat for a bachelor's dwelling. Rifles hung on the wall alongside what appeared to be hand-drawn maps. A small bookshelf held perhaps a dozen volumes, well worn but carefully arranged. Various animal pelts served as rugs on the wooden floor. You live here alone? She asked. Hunter nodded. 5 years now. It's nice, she said sincerely. Cozy. A hint of a smile touched Hunter's lips. Most folks around here think I'm half wild, living out this far on my own. He ladled stew into bowls. I guide hunting parties in the summer, trap in the winter, trade with the Sioux when they're passing through. Hope accepted the bowl with thanks. And before that, Hunter's expression closed slightly. Cavalry. Fought in the war, then stayed in uniform for a spell after. Hope sensed the reticence in his voice and didn't press further. Instead, she sampled the stew. "This is delicious." "Necessity makes a decent cook of any man out here," he replied, but looked pleased at the compliment. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Hope spoke again. "I need to find a way to contact my uncle, and to thank you properly for your help." "Storm still raging," Hunter said, gesturing to the window where darkness had fallen, but the sound of wind could still be heard howling. "Could be days before the road's clear. As for thanks," he shrugged, "any decent person would have done the same. Not everyone would have shown such care," Hope said softly, remembering the gentle way his hands had tended to her feet. A faint flush colored Hunter's tanned cheeks. "Seemed the thing to do." Hope studied him in the firelight. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and strong hands, a physique built by years of frontier life. His face was weathered but handsome, with a strong jaw partially covered by a neatly trimmed beard. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples fell to his collar. But it was his eyes that captured her attention, a clear blue-gray that reminded her of the winter sky, intelligent and observant. "How old are you, Mr. Zimmerman?" she asked suddenly. 34, he answered, looking slightly surprised at the direct question. "And yourself?" 26, she replied. "Practically an old maid by Philadelphia standards." Hunter's mouth quirked. "Out here, you'd be considered quite the catch." Hope laughed, the sound bright in the cozy cabin. "I'll remember that." As evening deepened into night, they talked. Hope told him about her life in Philadelphia, her father's shipping business, her mother's death from influenza 3 years prior, and finally her father's passing 6 months ago, leaving her alone in the world except for her uncle in Dakota Territory. "I've never lived outside a city," she admitted. "This is all quite overwhelming." "The territory can be harsh," Hunter acknowledged, "but there's beauty in it too. Come spring, these plains are alive with wildflowers, and the sky you've never seen stars like you'll see here on a clear night." His obvious love for this wild country was evident in his voice, and Hope found herself wanting to see it through his eyes. "What about you?" she asked. "You mentioned the cavalry, but where were you before that?" Hunter was silent for a moment, poking at the fire. "Born in New York. My father was a banker. I was supposed to follow in his footsteps, but I had different ideas." He smiled faintly. "Ran away at 18 to join the Union Army. Never went back east after the war. No family waiting for you," he shook his head. "My mother died when I was young. Father remarried. We weren't close. So we're both alone in the world," Hope observed quietly. Hunter looked at her across the fire. "Seems that way." The following days fell into an easy rhythm. The storm continued unabated, keeping them confined to the cabin. Hunter taught Hope the basics of frontier cooking, and she surprised him with her quick learning, though he insisted she continue using his bed while he slept by the fire. She began helping with the daily chores, washing dishes, mending clothes, and keeping the cabin tidy. On the 4th day, Hope discovered an old fiddle tucked away in a trunk. "You play?" she asked, carefully lifting the instrument. Hunter looked up from cleaning his rifle. "Used to, not much lately. Would you?" she asked, holding it out to him. "I love music, and it's one of the things I've missed most these past days." Something in her earnest expression made him set aside his work and take the fiddle. He rosined the bow, tuned the strings with practiced fingers, then began to play. The melody was sweet and melancholy, an old folk tune about lost love and longing. Hope closed her eyes, swaying slightly to the music. When he finished, She opened her eyes to find him watching her with an unreadable expression. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "My mother taught me," he replied, setting the fiddle down carefully. "She was from Ireland, said music was the language of the soul." "She was right," Hope said. "Do you know any dancing tunes?" Hunter raised an eyebrow. "Thinking of having a ball in my humble cabin, Miss Addison?" Hope laughed. "Why not? We have music, space enough to move, and I, for one, could use some exercise after being cooped up for days." A smile tugged at Hunter's lips. "I know a reel or two." He picked up the fiddle again and launched into a lively tune. Hope clapped her hands in delight, then hitched up her borrowed clothes and began to dance, her feet now healed enough for such activity. She moved gracefully around the small space, occasionally grabbing Hunter's arm to spin herself. "Come on," she urged. "You can't expect me to dance alone." "Can't play and dance at the same time," he protested, but his eyes were bright with amusement. "Then stop playing and dance with me." Hunter hesitated, then set down the fiddle. "It's been a long time." "It's like riding a horse," Hope insisted, taking his hands. "Your body remembers." Awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence, Hunter joined her in the dance. He was surprisingly light on his feet for such a tall man, and soon they were spinning around the cabin, laughing as they occasionally bumped into furniture. When they finally stopped, breathless and flushed, they found themselves standing very close. Hope could feel the warmth radiating from his body, see the pulse beating in his throat. For a moment, something electric passed between them. Then Hunter stepped back, clearing his throat. "The storm's easing," he said, glancing toward the window. "Should be able to make it to town tomorrow if the trend holds." Hope felt a curious mixture of relief and disappointment. "That's good news." "I'll take you to the telegraph office," Hunter continued, busying himself with stoking the fire. "You can contact your uncle." "Yes," Hope agreed, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Thank you." That night neither slept well. Hope lay awake behind the curtain, listening to Hunter shift restlessly by the fire. Tomorrow would bring a return to civilization, to propriety and the life she had planned. Yet somehow, the prospect brought less joy than she would have expected a few days ago. Morning dawned clear and bright, the storm finally spent. After a quick breakfast, Hunter brought out his spare coat and a pair of boots stuffed with rags to fit Hope's smaller feet. "Not elegant, but they'll keep you warm," he said as she pulled them on. "I've learned that warmth trumps elegance out here," she replied with a smile. Hunter harnessed his horse to a small sleigh and helped Hope aboard, wrapping a buffalo robe around her for extra protection against the cold. The journey to town took nearly 2 hours, the sleigh gliding over the fresh snow. Along the way, Hunter pointed out landmarks: a frozen creek where he fished in summer, hills where elk gathered in spring, the distant smudge on the horizon that was the railroad. Fargo appeared suddenly, a collection of wooden buildings rising from the white prairie, smoke curling from chimneys. Despite its small size, it seemed bustling after the isolation of Hunter's cabin. "The telegraph office is there," Hunter said, pointing to a building with Western Union painted across its front. "The hotel's been rebuilt after the fire last year that sit on the corner, and the sheriff's office is the brick building." He helped Hope down from the sleigh, steadying her when she slipped slightly on the packed snow of the main street. Several people nodded greetings to Hunter, eyeing Hope with undisguised curiosity. "Folks don't miss much around here," Hunter murmured as he escorted her toward the telegraph office. The operator, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up when they entered. "Zimmerman," he greeted, then his eyes widened at the sight of Hope. "Madam, this is Miss Addison," Hunter introduced. "She needs to send an urgent wire to Bismarck." Hope stepped forward. "To Dr. Elijah Addison." I need to inform him that I'm safe in Fargo and will continue my journey as soon as possible." The operator nodded, picking up his pencil. "Go ahead with your message, madam." Hope dictated a brief telegram explaining her situation in the barest terms, not wanting to alarm her uncle unnecessarily. When she had finished, the operator calculated the cost. "That'll be 60 cents, he said. Hope's face fell. I have no money. The robbers took everything." "I've got it," Hunter said immediately, reaching into his pocket for coins. "I'll pay you back," Hope insisted. Hunter waved away her concern. "Consider it part of the rescue package." The operator's eyebrows rose at this exchange, but he took Hunter's money and assured them the telegram would go out immediately. "Might be a response within the hour if your uncle's near the telegraph office in Bismarck." "We'll wait," Hunter decided. "Meanwhile, let's get you some proper clothes." He led Hope to the general store, where the proprietor's wife helped her select a simple but well-made dress, sturdy boots, a warm coat, and other necessities. Again, Hunter paid, ignoring Hope's increasingly distressed protests. "You can send money when you're settled," he told her firmly. "Can't have you freezing to death after all the work I put into saving you." The shopkeeper's wife, Mrs. Daniels, looked between them with keen interest. "How exactly did you two meet?" she asked, not bothering to disguise her curiosity. Before Hunter could answer, Hope spoke. "Mr. Zimmerman saved my life," she said simply. "I was robbed and left to die in the snow. He found me, carried me to safety, and nursed me back to health." Mrs. Daniels' eyes widened. "Robbed? Was it the Harmon gang?" "They've been terrorizing travelers for months." "I believe so," Hope replied. 3 men broke into my hotel room. They took everything, even my shoes." "Sheriff Parker's been after them," Mrs. Daniels said, shaking her head. "You should report what happened." Hunter nodded. "We'll stop by his office after we check for a telegram response." Hope changed into her new clothes in the store's back room, emerging looking much more like the proper lady she was. The blue dress complemented her dark hair and brought out the color in her eyes. Hunter found himself staring before quickly looking away. "Better?" Hope asked, smoothing down the skirt. "Much," he replied, his voice gruffer than he intended. They returned to the telegraph office just as a response was arriving from Bismarck. The operator handed the paper to Hope, who read it aloud. "Relieved to hear you are safe. Stop railway blocked by snow past Fargo. Stop remain there until tracks cleared. Stop will come for you when possible. Stop wire hotel name. Stop Uncle Elijah." Hope looked up at Hunter. "It seems I'm stranded in Fargo for the foreseeable future." The operator interjected. "Railway superintendent was in earlier. Said it'll be at least 2 weeks before trains run again. Worst drifts in years." Hope's expression faltered. 2 weeks? But where will I stay?" "I have no money for a hotel." Hunter hesitated only briefly. "You could continue staying at my cabin," he offered. "Or—" He glanced at the operator, who was openly eavesdropping. "There's Mrs. Wilson's boarding house. She takes in travelers. Might be more appropriate." Hope understood his meaning immediately. A single woman staying with an unmarried man would cause talk, even under these extraordinary circumstances. "I wouldn't want to impose on you further," she said carefully. "It's no imposition," Hunter replied, "but people will talk." Hope considered this. In Philadelphia, such an arrangement would ruin her reputation irrevocably. But here, thousands of miles from home, with her very survival at stake, she found she cared less than she might have expected. "Let them talk," she said decisively. "You've proven yourself a gentleman, Mr. Zimmerman." "I trust you completely." Something flickered in Hunter's eyes, surprise, followed by a warmth that made Hope's heart beat faster. "Very well," he said, "but we should still report the robbery to Sheriff Parker before we leave town." The sheriff's office was warm and smelled of tobacco. Sheriff Parker himself was a stocky man with a bushy mustache and shrewd eyes. He listened carefully as Hope recounted the robbery, taking notes in a small ledger. "Can you describe the men?" he asked when she had finished. Hope closed her eyes, trying to recall details through the haze of fear. 3 men. One was tall and thin with a scar across his cheek. One was shorter with reddish hair. The third stayed by the door. I couldn't see him clearly. Sheriff Parker nodded. "That's them all right. Samuel Harmon and his brothers. They've been working their way up and down the railway line for months. You're lucky to be alive, madam." "I know," Hope said quietly. "If Mr. Zimmerman hadn't found me when he did." The sheriff's gaze shifted to Hunter. "Lucky indeed that you were passing by your remote cabin, Zimmerman." There was something in his tone that made Hope bristle. "God's providence, I'd call it," she said firmly. Sheriff Parker seemed to consider this, then nodded. "Well, we'll keep an eye out for the Harmons. Don't expect we'll catch them soon, though. They know the territory too well." He closed his ledger. "Where will you be staying while you're in Fargo, Miss Addison?" Before Hope could answer, Hunter spoke. "Miss Addison will be staying at my cabin until the trains run again. She has nowhere else to go." The sheriff's eyebrows rose, but to his credit, he made no comment beyond. "I see. Well, if you need anything, Miss Addison, my office is always open." As they left the sheriff's office, Hope could feel curious eyes following them down the street. "I've just scandalized the entire town, haven't I?" she murmured. Hunter's mouth quirked. "Fargo's seen worse scandals, but yes, we'll be the subject of gossip for a while." "Does that bother you?" Hunter considered this. "Not particularly. Does it bother you?" Hope thought about the society she had left behind in Philadelphia, where reputation was everything, and a woman's value was measured by her adherence to strict social codes. "It should," she admitted, "but strangely, it doesn't." They stopped at the general store once more to purchase supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, and other necessities to sustain 2 people for a couple of weeks. Hunter also insisted on buying fabric and sewing supplies, so Hope could make herself additional clothing. As they loaded their purchases into the sleigh, Mrs. Daniels approached with a small package. "A few extra things a lady might need," she said with a meaningful look at Hope. "No charge." Hope accepted the package with gratitude, suspecting it contained personal items too delicate to be mentioned in mixed company. "You're very kind." Mrs. Daniels patted her hand. "We women must look out for each other in this territory. It's not an easy place." She glanced at Hunter, who was adjusting the horse's harness. "Though you seem to have found yourself a good protector." Hope followed her gaze. "Yes," she said softly, "I believe I have." The sun was beginning its descent as they left town, painting the snow-covered prairie in shades of pink and gold. Hope sat close to Hunter on the sleigh seat, the buffalo robe wrapped around them both for warmth. The intimacy of the arrangement was not lost on either of them. "Thank you," Hope said after they had traveled some distance in companionable silence, "for everything. The clothes, the supplies, letting me stay." "Don't mention it," Hunter replied, keeping his eyes on the trail ahead. "It's nice having company, truth be told. Gets lonely out here sometimes." "Do you ever think of going back east?" Hope asked. Hunter shook his head. "Nothing for me there anymore. This is home now." He glanced at her. "What about you? Will you stay in Bismarck with your uncle?" Hope sighed. "I don't know. I have no home to return to in Philadelphia. The house was sold to settle Father's debts. Uncle Elijah offered me a place to stay while I figure things out." "What would you like to do, if you could choose anything?" It was a question Hope had been asking herself for months. "I was trained to be a wife and hostess," she said with a touch of bitterness. "My education was ornamental music, French, watercolors, nothing particularly useful in the real world." "You seem capable enough to me," Hunter observed. You learned to cook over a wood stove in days. Most city women would still be weeping over their predicament. Hope smiled at that. Perhaps, but I don't know what I want yet, just something meaningful, a purpose. Hunter nodded, understanding in his eyes. You'll find it. They reached the cabin as dusk was falling, the windows dark and the interior cold. Hunter quickly set about rebuilding the fire while Hope unpacked their supplies. The domestic routine they fell into felt surprisingly natural, as if they had been sharing this space for years rather than days. Over a simple dinner of salt pork and beans, Hope asked the question that had been on her mind since the telegraph office. What will happen after the trains start running again? Hunter paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. I suppose you'll go on to Bismarck as planned. Yes, Hope agreed. I suppose I will. Neither mentioned the reluctance evident in both their voices. The days that followed established a comfortable routine. Hunter taught Hope more about frontier living, how to build and maintain a fire, how to use the few tools he possessed, how to identify animal tracks in the snow. Hope, in turn, read aloud from his small collection of books in the evenings, her clear voice bringing the stories to life in a way Hunter had never experienced reading alone. A week into their arrangement, Hunter announced he needed to check his trap lines. I'll be gone most of the day, he told Hope over breakfast. Will you be all right here alone? Of course, she assured him. I have plenty to keep me occupied. She gestured to the half-finished dress she was sewing from the fabric purchased in town. Hunter nodded, though he seemed hesitant to leave. Keep the rifle handy just in case, though it's unlikely anyone would venture this far out. I'll be fine, Hope repeated firmly. Go tend to your business. After Hunter left, the cabin seemed unusually quiet. Hope worked on her sewing for a while, then decided to bake bread, a skill Mrs. Daniels had described to her in town. Following the rough instructions, she mixed flour, salt, and water, then kneaded the dough with determined concentration. As she worked, she found her thoughts drifting to Hunter. In just over a week, he had gone from stranger to what? Friend, certainly, but the warmth that spread through her chest when he smiled at her, the way her skin tingled when his hand accidentally brushed hers, these suggested something beyond friendship. Don't be foolish, she scolded herself aloud. You've known the man barely 10 days. Yet she couldn't deny the connection between them, a bond forged first in crisis and then strengthened by the intimate daily sharing of this small space. Hunter was unlike any man she had known in Philadelphia, straightforward, capable, without pretense. When he spoke, his words carried weight because he never wasted them on flattery or social niceties. Hope placed the bread dough near the fire to rise and busied herself with cleaning the already tidy cabin. She was just considering what to prepare for dinner when a sound outside caught her attention. A horse was approaching, but it was too early for Hunter's return. Remembering his warning, Hope moved quickly to retrieve the rifle from its place on the wall. She had just grasped it when a sharp knock came at the door. "Hello, the cabin," a man's voice called. "Anyone home?" Hope hesitated, heart pounding. "Who's there?" "Name's Harmon, miss. My brothers and I got lost in these parts, looking for directions." Ice flooded Hope's veins. Harmon, the name of the robbers who had attacked her in town. Were they the same men? And if so, how had they found her here? "My husband will be back any minute," she called, trying to keep her voice steady. "He's just checking the livestock." A laugh from outside. "No livestock tracks in this snow, miss. No husband tracks either from what we can see. Just one set going out this morning, a man, and none coming back." They had been watching the cabin, waiting until Hunter left. "I'm armed," Hope warned, raising the rifle though her hands trembled. "I'll shoot if you try to enter." "Now, miss," the voice wheedled, We just want to warm up a bit, maybe have some coffee. We don't mean no harm." "You meant harm in Fargo," Hope retorted before she could stop herself. A pause, then. "Well now, ain't you the girl from the hotel? Thought you looked familiar when we spotted you in town yesterday. Fancy meeting you way out here." Hope cursed herself for the slip. "Leave now," she demanded. "The sheriff knows about you. He's looking for you." "All the more reason for us to lay low for a spell," came the reply. "Open up, miss, or we'll huff and we'll puff and blow your little cabin down." Laughter followed this remark. 3 distinct voices. All 3 brothers were there. Hope backed away from the door, mind racing. The cabin was sturdily built, but if they were determined to break in, they would eventually succeed. Hunter wouldn't be back for hours. She was on her own. A sudden thump against the door made her jump. They were trying to force their way in. Hope raised the rifle, aiming at the door, trying to remember Hunter's brief instructions on its use. The metal was cold and heavy in her hands. Another thump and the door frame splintered slightly. It wouldn't hold much longer. Hope's finger tightened on the trigger. Could she actually shoot a man? The thought made her stomach turn, but the alternative, being at the mercy of these men again, was unthinkable. A third impact, and the door burst open. A tall man with a scarred face stood in the doorway, snow swirling around him. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Hope with the rifle. "Now, miss," he began, hands raised in a placating gesture. "No need for that." "Step back," Hope commanded, surprised at the steadiness of her voice. "All of you, get back on your horses and ride away." The man, Samuel Harmon, she presumed, smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "You won't shoot us. Nice lady like you. You don't have it in you." He took a step forward. Hope fired. The rifle's recoil sent her staggering backward, the sound deafening in the small cabin. She had aimed above his head, not wanting to kill, only warn. Splinters flew from the door frame where the bullet struck. Harmon froze, his smile vanishing. "You crazy bitch." "Next one won't be a warning," Hope said, though her arms shook from the effort of holding the heavy rifle. "Leave. Now." For a moment she thought he would comply. Then his expression hardened and he lunged forward. Hope tried to fire again, but in her panic, couldn't manage the mechanism quickly enough. Harmon grabbed the barrel, wrenching it from her grasp. Hope stumbled backward, searching desperately for a weapon, anything to defend herself. "You've caused us a lot of trouble," Harmon growled, advancing on her. "Time to pay for that." Hope grabbed a cast iron skillet from the stove and swung it with all her might. It connected with Harmon's shoulder, drawing a howl of pain. But before she could strike again, rough hands seized her from behind. One of the other brothers had circled around through the rear window while she was distracted. "Feisty one," he commented, his breath hot against her ear. "I like that." Hope struggled against his grip, but he was too strong. Harmon approached, rubbing his injured shoulder, eyes dark with anger. "We were just going to rob the place," he said conversationally. "But now I'm thinking we might stay a while. What do you say, boys?" The third brother appeared in the doorway, a thin man with reddish hair. "Weather's turning bad again anyway," he observed with a grin. "Might as well get comfortable." Hope felt sick with fear but refused to show it. "Hunter will kill you when he returns," she said, her voice low and fierce. "Hunter?" Harmon laughed. "That your mountain man, don't worry about him. Jed here left him a little surprise out on the trail. He won't be coming back." Cold dread settled in Hope's stomach. "What did you do?" the red-haired brother Jed smirked. "Let's just say I adjusted some of his traps. The kind that snap shut real quick. The kind that can take a man's leg off." "You're lying," Hope whispered, but the sick certainty in their eyes told her otherwise. "Make yourself useful, woman," Harmon ordered, sitting down at the table as if he owned the place. "Cook us something to eat. We've had a long ride." The brother holding her released his grip but kept his pistol trained on her. No sudden moves now. Hope's mind raced as she moved woodenly to the stove. Hunter was in danger, possibly badly injured or worse. She needed to get away to find him. But how? As she stirred the remnants of yesterday's stew, adding more water to stretch it, an idea began to form. The cabin had only one main room, but there was a small storage space accessible through a trapdoor in the floor. Hunter had shown it to her when explaining where he kept extra supplies. If she could create a distraction. "How long until your friend returns?" Harmon asked, watching her closely. Hope shrugged, trying to appear defeated. "Usually before dark. Then we have plenty of time to enjoy your hospitality," Harmon said with a cruel smile. "After we eat, we can discuss how you'll entertain us." Hope suppressed a shudder, focusing on her plan. She ladled stew into bowls, her movements deliberately clumsy. "Sorry," she murmured when she spilled some on the table. "I'm nervous." "You should be," Harmon replied, but his tone was almost jovial now that he believed himself in control. Hope served the three men, then pretended to trip as she turned back to the stove. She fell hard, knocking over the remaining pot of stew. Hot liquid splashed across the floor. "Damn it, woman!" Jed shouted, jumping up as stew splattered his boots. "I'm sorry," Hope cried, scrambling to clean the mess. As she moved, she subtly shifted the small rug that covered the trapdoor. "Let me get a cloth." She moved toward the bed area, making sure to keep all three men in her sight. They had relaxed slightly, focused on their food, confident in their control of the situation. The pistol that had been aimed at her was now resting on the table beside its owner. Hope grabbed a blanket, bundling it as if to use for cleanup. In the same motion, she knocked over the oil lamp near the bed. Glass shattered. Oil splashed across the wooden floor and ignited instantly from the nearby fire. Flames leapt up, catching the edge of the bed curtain. "Fire!" Jed yelled, jumping to his feet. In the moment of confusion, Hope made her move. She threw the blanket over the nearest brother's head, then dove for the trapdoor, yanking it open and slipping into the dark space below before any of them could react. The storage space was small and cold, smelling of earth and root vegetables. Hope pulled the trapdoor shut above her just as boots thundered across the floor. She felt around in the darkness, heart pounding so loudly she was sure they must hear it above the commotion. "Where'd she go?" she heard one of them shout. "Never mind her, put out the fire before it takes the whole cabin." Hope's questing fingers found what she was searching for, a small tunnel extending from the storage space. Hunter had mentioned it was an old fox den that he had widened to provide emergency egress from the cabin in case of fire. It was barely large enough for a person to crawl through, and Hope had no idea if it was still passable. But she had no choice. She crawled forward on her hands and knees, ignoring the dirt and roots that scratched at her face and hands. Behind her, she could hear the men stomping out the fire and cursing as they searched for her. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, twisting slightly as it followed the contours of the hill behind the cabin. Just as Hope was beginning to fear it had collapsed further ahead, trapping her, she felt a breath of cold air on her face. Moments later, she emerged into the blinding whiteness of the snow-covered hillside, gasping in the frigid air. The cabin was just visible below her position, smoke still rising from the chimney. There was no sign the men had discovered the tunnel yet. Hope knew she had little time. They would find the trapdoor eventually, and when they did, they would come after her. She needed to move quickly. Hunter had gone north that morning to check his traps. Hope oriented herself using the sun, then began trudging through the snow as fast as her skirts would allow. The new boots Hunter had bought her in town were sturdy and warm, a vast improvement over her barefoot arrival a week earlier. Still, the snow was deep and progress was slow and exhausting. After what felt like hours but was probably less than one, Hope came across tracks in the snow, a single horse, heading north. Hunter's trail. She followed it with renewed determination, scanning the white landscape for any sign of him. The wind was picking up again, clouds gathering on the horizon. Another storm was coming. If she didn't find Hunter soon, they might both freeze to death out here. "Hunter," she called, her voice snatched away by the wind. "Hunter, where are you?" Hope wasn't sure how much further she could go. Her legs ached from pushing through the deep snow, and despite her warm clothing, the cold was beginning to seep into her bones. Just as she was considering the grim possibility that she might have to turn back, she spotted something dark against the white landscape ahead. A horse, Hunter's horse, standing quietly beside what appeared to be a fallen tree, and beside it, a figure in the snow. "Hunter!" Hope cried, forcing her tired legs to move faster. As she drew closer, her heart clenched with fear. He was lying motionless, half buried in snow. Had she found him only to lose him? But as she approached, Hunter stirred, raising his head weakly. "Hope!" His voice was barely audible over the wind. "What are you doing here, the Harmon brothers?" she gasped, dropping to her knees beside him. "They came to the cabin. Said they'd sabotaged your traps." Hunter grimaced, trying to sit up. "They did. Bear trap. Got my leg." Hope looked down and had to stifle a cry. Hunter's right leg was caught in the vicious metal jaws of a trap, blood staining the snow beneath it. He had managed to cover himself with his coat to prevent freezing, but the injury was severe. "I need to get you free," she said, examining the trap with horror. "Release mechanism," Hunter directed through gritted teeth. "On both sides, push down simultaneously." Hope placed her hands on the indicated springs, summoning all her strength to compress them. The trap's jaws relaxed slightly, and Hunter pulled his leg free with a groan of pain. "We need to stop the bleeding," Hope said, already unwinding her woolen scarf. The wound was deep and ugly, but the thick leather of his boot had prevented the trap from severing his leg completely. She bound it tightly, knowing it was a temporary measure at best. "Can you ride?" she asked, looking at his horse, which had remarkably stayed nearby. Hunter nodded grimly. "Have to. Storm's coming." He glanced at her, concern overriding his pain. "The Harmons, did they hurt you?" "No," Hope assured him. "I escaped through the tunnel under the cabin." A ghost of a smile touched Hunter's lips. "Clever girl." With considerable effort and muffled groans of pain, Hunter managed to mount his horse with Hope's help. She climbed up behind him, supporting his body with her own. "The cabin's not safe," she said, wrapping her arms around his waist to hold him steady. "They're still there." Hunter considered their options, his thinking slowed by pain and blood loss. "Town's too far in this condition. There's a line shack about 2 miles east, used by cowboys in the summer. Basic, but it'll have firewood." Hope nodded, turning the horse in the direction he indicated. As they rode, the first snowflakes of the new storm began to fall, swirling around them in the strengthening wind. Hunter's condition deteriorated as they traveled. His body grew heavier against Hope, his responses to her worried questions becoming more slurred. By the time the rough outline of the line shack appeared through the thickening snow, he was barely conscious. The shack was little more than a one-room structure with a small stove, a narrow cot, and stacked firewood along one wall. It was cold and musty from disuse, but it was shelter from the storm that was now howling around them. Hope helped Hunter inside and onto the cot, then hurried to start a fire in the small stove. Once flames were crackling and beginning to warm the space, she turned her attention to his injured leg. The makeshift bandage was soaked through with blood. Hope carefully unwound it, steeling herself against the site of the wound beneath. She had assisted at her father's bedside during his illness and had acquired some rudimentary nursing skills, but this was beyond her experience. Need to. Cauterize, Hunter mumbled, his face alarmingly pale. Hope swallowed hard, understanding what he meant. Tell me what to do. Through fragmentary instructions, Hunter guided her through the grim process. She heated his knife in the fire until it glowed red. Then, with hands that shook only slightly, applied it to the worst of the gash in his leg. The sizzle of flesh and Hunter's choked cry of pain would haunt her dreams for years to come, but the bleeding finally stopped. Using water melted from snow and strips torn from her petticoat, Hope cleaned the wound as best she could, then bound it with fresh bandages. Throughout the process, Hunter drifted in and out of consciousness, his normally tanned face now ashen. With the immediate crisis addressed, Hope took stock of their situation. The shack was warming slowly, but the storm outside was reaching blizzard proportions. They were effectively trapped here for the duration, which might be days, judging by the weather. There was no food that she could find, though melted snow provided water. Hunter's condition was stable for now, but he had lost a significant amount of blood, and infection remained a serious risk. Hope sat beside the cot, holding Hunter's hand in both of hers. "You'll be all right," she whispered, unsure if he could hear her. "You have to be all right. I need you." The admission, spoken in the dim light of the shack with only the unconscious Hunter as witness, surprised even Hope herself. But it was true somewhere in the days since he had carried her barefoot from the snow. Hunter Zimmerman had become essential to her. The storm raged through the night, wind rattling the shack's thin walls and driving snow through every crack. Hope dozed intermittently in her seated position, waking frequently to check on Hunter and add wood to the stove. By morning, his fever had begun. For 2 days, Hope fought to keep him alive. She bathed his burning skin with cool water, forced sips of melted snow between his parched lips, and talked to him constantly, though he rarely responded coherently. When his fever reached its peak and he thrashed deliriously on the narrow cot, she held him down to prevent him from reopening his wound, her tears falling unnoticed onto his chest. "Stay with me," she pleaded when his breathing became shallow and labored. "Please, Hunter, I love you. Don't leave me alone out here." Whether it was her care, his own frontier-hardened constitution, or the confession she hadn't meant to make, Hunter's fever broke during the 3rd night. Hope, exhausted beyond measure, had finally succumbed to sleep beside the cot, her head resting on the edge near his arm. She woke to the sensation of fingers gently stroking her hair. "Hope," Hunter whispered, his voice weak but clear. "You saved me." Joy surged through her as she raised her head to meet his gaze. His eyes were tired but lucid, the fever haze gone. "We saved each other," she corrected, clasping his hand. Hunter's fingers tightened around hers. "The storm, still blowing, but not as bad as yesterday. How do you feel?" "Like I tangled with a grizzly and lost," he admitted with a weak smile, "but I'll live thanks to you." His expression grew serious. "The Harmons, don't worry about them now," Hope interrupted. "We're safe here for the moment." Hunter nodded, accepting this temporarily. "Water." Hope helped him drink, then adjusted his position to make him more comfortable. His color was better, and when she checked his leg, she was relieved to see no signs of serious infection. "You need to eat something," she said, frustrated by their lack of supplies. "I'll check outside, see if there's anything stored here that we missed." "Be careful," Hunter cautioned. "The Harmons might still be searching for us." Hope nodded, wrapping herself in her coat before venturing outside. The storm had diminished to light snowfall, and the landscape was transformed, drifts piled high against the shack's walls, the prairie a vast white emptiness in all directions. No tracks marred the perfect snow. No one had passed this way during the storm. Behind the shack, Hope discovered a small lean-to she hadn't noticed in their desperate arrival. Inside, to her immense relief, were basic supplies: jerky, beans, coffee, and even a small sack of flour. Someone, probably the cowboys who used this shelter in summer, had left emergency provisions. When she returned with her bounty, Hunter was attempting to sit up. Hope rushed to assist him, propping him against the wall with folded blankets. "Found food," she announced triumphantly, displaying her findings. "Trail angels," Hunter murmured, using a frontier term for those who left supplies for travelers. Hope quickly prepared a simple meal, and they ate in companionable silence, the relief of survival temporarily overshadowing all other concerns. When they had finished, however, the reality of their situation reasserted itself. "We can't stay here indefinitely," Hunter said, gesturing to his injured leg. "I can't walk far, but I might be able to ride if we can find my horse." "It wandered off during the storm," Hope admitted. "But it might return. Horses often do," Hunter nodded. "If not, we're looking at a long wait. The Harmons may have left the area by now, especially with the storm, but my cabin may not be safe to return to." "We could try to reach town," Hope suggested. "Too far on foot in these conditions, especially with my injury." Hunter's expression was grim. "Our best option is to wait here, hope my horse returns, and then make for town together." Hope agreed, though the prospect of an extended stay in the primitive shack was daunting. Still, they had shelter, fire, and now food, better circumstances than many found themselves in on the frontier. As the day progressed, Hunter's strength gradually returned. By evening, he was able to sit up for longer periods and even offered to help prepare their simple supper. Hope refused, insisting he rest, but was heartened by his improvement. They talked long into the night, the small stove casting a warm glow over their faces. Hunter shared stories of his time in the cavalry, his early struggles in the territory, and the peace he had eventually found in his solitary life. Hope spoke of her sheltered upbringing in Philadelphia, her father's business troubles, and her uncertain future. "I meant what I said earlier," Hope said suddenly, staring into the flames. "When you were delirious with fever, I said I love you." Hunter's breath caught audibly. "I thought I dreamed that." Hope turned to face him, courage born of their shared ordeal allowing her to speak her heart. "It's strange, isn't it? We've known each other such a short time, but out here perhaps time means something different. Life and death are so close together. It clarifies things." Hunter reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. "I've never been good with words," he said slowly. "Always figured action spoke clearer, but if you want words—" He took a deep breath. "I love you too, Hope Addison. Have since about the second day you were in my cabin, tried to fight it, knew you'd be leaving soon, but there it is." Hope moved to sit beside him on the cot, careful of his injured leg. "What happens now, when we get back to civilization?" Hunter's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "That depends on what you want. Your uncle's still waiting in Bismarck. You have a life to build there." "Or here," Hope said softly, "with you if you'll have me." The wonder in Hunter's eyes was answer enough, but he spoke anyway. "Are you sure? My life is hard, isolated, nothing like what you're used to." "I'm not the same woman who arrived on that train," Hope replied. "These past weeks have changed me, or perhaps just revealed who I truly am." She smiled. "I'm tougher than I look, you know," Hunter laughed, wincing slightly as the movement jarred his leg. "That you are." Still, marriage to a trapper in the Dakota Territory isn't exactly what most Eastern ladies dream of. Hope's heart leapt at the word marriage, though she tried to maintain her composure. "I'm not most Eastern ladies. Not anymore." Hunter lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against her knuckles. "No, you're not." His eyes, warm and certain, met hers. "When we get back to town, I'll speak to the preacher, if that's what you want." "It is," Hope whispered, leaning forward to press her lips gently to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Hunter's hand came up to cradle the back of her head. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "I should rest," Hunter said reluctantly. "And you should too. Tomorrow we can figure out how to get back to civilization." Hope nodded, moving back to her spot beside the stove. Despite the discomfort of sleeping on the hard floor, she fell asleep with a smile on her face. Morning brought unexpected deliverance. Hope woke to the sound of a horse nickering outside the shack. Peering through the single grimy window, she was overjoyed to see Hunter's mare standing patiently in the snow. "Your horse is back," she called to Hunter, who was already awake and testing his injured leg. "Good girl," he said with evident relief. "She'll get us to town." Together, they prepared for the journey. Hunter's leg was still painful, but he could put some weight on it now. Hope packed their few belongings and the remaining supplies, then helped Hunter mount the horse. She climbed up behind him, and they set off toward Fargo. The journey was slow and difficult. The fresh snow made travel arduous, and Hunter's injury necessitated frequent stops. By the time the town came into view, the sun was already low in the sky, casting long blue shadows across the white landscape. They rode directly to the doctor's office, where Dr. Williams examined Hunter's leg with professional interest. "Crude but effective cauterization," he commented, inspecting Hope's handiwork. "You've likely saved his leg, young lady." While the doctor cleaned and properly bandaged the wound, Sheriff Parker arrived, alerted by a townsperson who had spotted their return. "The Harmons?" he asked without preamble. Hunter explained what had happened, from the sabotage trap to Hope's escape and their days in the line shack. The sheriff listened grimly, taking notes. "Sounds like they were watching you for days," he observed. "Probably figured a remote cabin would have valuables stored for winter. When they recognized Miss Addison from the hotel robbery, it became personal. Are they still in the area?" Hope asked anxiously. Sheriff Parker shook his head. "Doubt it. Storm would have driven them to seek better shelter. My guess is they've moved on to easier pickings. Still, I'll organize a posse to check your cabin, Zimmerman, and keep an eye out for them." After the sheriff left, Dr. Williams insisted Hunter remain in town for a few days under his observation. "That leg needs proper rest, and I want to watch for infection." Mrs. Wilson's boarding house had a room available, and Hope took it for both of them, ignoring the raised eyebrows this arrangement caused. After all they had been through, propriety seemed a small concern. That evening, as they sat in Mrs. Wilson's parlor, Hunter's leg propped on a footstool, Hope beside him on the sofa, Hunter brought up their future again. "I meant what I said in the line shack," he said quietly, ensuring no one else could overhear. "About marriage. But I think we should do things properly. Contact your uncle first, let him know your intentions." Hope nodded, though part of her wanted to simply find the preacher and be done with it. "You're right, he deserves to know," she hesitated. "What if he objects?" Hunter considered this. "Would that change your mind?" "No," Hope said firmly. "I'm a grown woman making my own choice, but I'd prefer his blessing." "Then we'll write to him tomorrow," Hunter decided. "Invite him to come to Fargo when the trains are running again. We can be married with him present." Hope smiled, imagining her uncle's surprise at the turn events had taken. He'll be shocked. He was expecting to welcome his grieving niece into his home, not give her away to a frontier trapper. Hunter looked suddenly uncertain. "Will he think you're making a mistake, throwing away your future on a man like me?" Hope placed her hand on his arm. "Uncle Elijah isn't like that. He left Philadelphia himself 20 years ago because he wanted adventure and purpose. He'll understand. The following days passed in a peaceful routine. Hunter's leg improved rapidly under proper medical care. Hope sent a detailed letter to her uncle, explaining everything that had happened and her plans to marry Hunter. They received word that train service would resume within the week, bringing mail and passengers from the east for the first time since the storms began. Sheriff Parker and his men checked Hunter's cabin and found it abandoned but significantly damaged. The fire Hope had started as a diversion had been extinguished before it could destroy the structure completely, but much of the interior was charred or water damaged. "It can be repaired," Hunter said philosophically when he heard the news. "Spring would be a good time to rebuild anyway." "Make it larger, perhaps." Hope caught his meaning and blushed. A larger cabin would accommodate a family, children. 5 days after their return to town, as Hunter was discussing cabin renovations with the local carpenter, a telegram arrived from Bismarck. "Relieved to hear of your safety. Stop coming to Fargo on first train. Stop eager to meet the man who saved my niece. Stop Elijah Addison." "That's settled then," Hunter said with evident relief. "He's coming here." "Were you worried?" Hope asked, amused. Hunter shrugged. "A bit. Not every day a frontier trapper asks a Philadelphia doctor for his niece's hand." "Well, you didn't exactly ask," Hope teased. "You stated your intentions rather definitively, as I recall." Hunter flushed. "Would you prefer I did it properly?" Without waiting for an answer, he lowered himself somewhat awkwardly to one knee, mindful of his injured leg. Taking her hand in his, he looked up into her surprised face. "Hope Addison, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? I can't offer you luxury or ease, but I can promise to love you every day of my life and to build a good home with you here in this wild country." Tears sprang to Hope's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times yes, Doctor." Williams declared Hunter fit to leave his care the day before Elijah Addison was scheduled to arrive. They moved back to Hunter's cabin, now partially repaired by townsfolk, who had rallied to help once they heard the full story of the couple's ordeal. "It's strange to be back here," Hope remarked as they surveyed the damage. "So much has happened since I first arrived." Hunter nodded, his arm around her waist. "Barefoot in the snow. I still can't believe you survived that." Hope leaned into him. "I had help." The following day, they waited at the small Fargo train station as the locomotive from the east pulled in with a screech of brakes and a billowing cloud of steam. Among the disembarking passengers was a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, his beard neatly trimmed and his clothes marking him as a person of means. "Uncle Elijah," Hope called, waving. Dr. Addison spotted them and hurried over, sweeping Hope into a tight embrace. "My dear girl. When I heard about the robbery, I feared the worst. Thank God you're safe." When they separated, Hope wiped tears from her eyes and turned to Hunter. "Uncle, this is Hunter Zimmerman, the man who saved my life and the man I'm going to marry." Elijah Addison regarded Hunter with keen interest, taking in his frontier appearance and the hint of uncertainty in his stance. Then, to Hunter's surprise, he extended his hand warmly. "Mr. Zimmerman, it seems I owe you a debt I can never repay." Hunter shook the offered hand firmly. "No debt, sir. Anyone would have done the same." "I rather doubt that," Elijah replied with a smile. "And please call me Elijah. We're to be family, after all." Over dinner at the best restaurant Fargo could offer, Elijah listened to the full account of Hope's ordeal and the events that followed. When they finished, he sat back, studying them both. "Life takes unexpected turns," he said thoughtfully. "When your father died, Hope, I expected you would come to Bismarck, perhaps teach at the new school, eventually meet a suitable doctor or lawyer." He chuckled. Instead, you've chosen a life that would have terrified the Philadelphia Society matrons who raised you. Hope tensed slightly. Do you disapprove? Elijah shook his head firmly. Quite the contrary. I see in you now a spirit I always suspected was there, but which Philadelphia convention smothered. And in you, Mr. Zimmerman Hunter, I see a man of principle and courage. He raised his glass. I give you both my wholehearted blessing. The relief on both their faces was palpable. Elijah continued, Now, when is this wedding to take place? We thought perhaps next week, Hope replied. A simple ceremony with Reverend Thornton. Elijah nodded approvingly. Excellent. That gives me time to fetch your grandmother's wedding ring from my home in Bismarck. It should be yours. Hunter looked startled. Sir, that's very generous, but nonsense, Elijah interrupted. It's tradition. Besides, I'll need to return to Bismarck to collect my things. I've been considering relocating my practice for some time. Fargo seems to be growing rapidly and could use another physician. Hope's eyes widened. You're moving to Fargo, Elijah smiled. If you'll have me nearby, not too nearby, mind you, I have no intention of interfering in your married life, but close enough to be of help when needed. He glanced meaningfully at Hope's midsection, then at Hunter. Frontier wives often appreciate having a doctor in the family, especially when children arrive. Hope blushed deeply, while Hunter looked simultaneously embarrassed and pleased at the prospect. The wedding was held the following Sunday in Fargo's small church. Hope wore a simple cream-colored dress made by Mrs. Daniels and the other ladies of the town, who had taken a collective interest in this romance that had blossomed so unexpectedly in their community. Hunter, looking somewhat uncomfortable in a new suit, waited for her at the altar, his face transforming with wonder when she appeared at the church door on her uncle's arm. The entire town turned out for the ceremony and the celebration that followed. Even Sheriff Parker, unbent enough to offer a toast to the couple who had survived blizzards, robbers, and injury to find each other. As the spring of 1879 arrived, melting the snow and bringing new life to the Dakota prairie, Hope and Hunter Zimmerman stood on the porch of their rebuilt cabin. The structure was larger now, with a proper bedroom and a small study where Hope had set up her writing desk. At her uncle's encouragement, she had begun recording her experiences for Eastern newspapers, whose readers devoured her accounts of frontier life with fascination. Hunter's trapping business had expanded to include guiding hunting parties from the East, wealthy men who paid handsomely for authentic wilderness adventures. His reputation for reliability and knowledge of the territory spread, bringing more business than he could handle alone. I was thinking, Hope said as they watched the sunset paint the vast sky in shades of orange and pink. We might need to add another room soon. Hunter glanced at her questioningly, then followed her gaze to where her hand rested gently on her stomach. His eyes widened in understanding. Are you sure? He asked, voice filled with wonder. Hope nodded, smiling. Uncle Elijah confirmed it yesterday. He says the baby will arrive in late autumn. Hunter gathered her in his arms, his kiss conveying all the joy and love words couldn't express. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. From the moment I found you barefoot in the snow, my life changed, he said softly. I never imagined I could be this happy. Nor I, Hope whispered. It seems that sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. As darkness fell across the Dakota prairie, the lights of their cabin glowed warm and inviting, a beacon of home and hearth in the vastness of the frontier, and a testament to the love that had been forged in the crucible of survival against impossible odds. 2 years later, Hope sat on the same porch, watching Hunter play with their son Henry, a robust toddler with his father's blue-gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. Beside Hope in a cradle, their 2-month-old daughter Margaret slept peacefully, tiny fingers curled around the edge of her blanket. Fargo had grown considerably in those 2 years, with new businesses opening and more settlers arriving by train each month. Elijah Addison's medical practice was flourishing, and he had recently taken on an apprentice, a promising young man from Chicago who might, Elijah hinted with a twinkle in his eye, make a suitable husband for one of the Nelson girls when they were of age. Hunter's guiding business had expanded to include a partner, a former cavalry officer who shared Hunter's knowledge of the territory and his respect for the land. This arrangement allowed Hunter to spend more time at home with his growing family, especially during the winter months. Hope's writings about frontier life had been collected and published as a book, which had found surprising success among Eastern readers fascinated by life in the Wild West. She was working on a second volume, this one focusing on the women who helped build frontier communities. The Harmon brothers had eventually been captured in Montana Territory, tried, and sentenced to prison for their numerous crimes. Sheriff Parker had personally delivered the news, adding with satisfaction that they wouldn't threaten anyone for at least 10 years. As the sun began to set, Hunter joined Hope on the porch, little Henry now drowsy in his arms. "Another beautiful evening," Hope observed, leaning against her husband's shoulder. Hunter nodded, his gaze taking in their home, their children, and the life they had built together. "It's a good life we have here." "The best," Hope agreed, thinking of how far she had come from that desperate young woman who had arrived barefoot in the snow, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart full of uncertainty. Hunter seemed to follow her thoughts. "Any regrets?" "About staying here instead of returning east," Hope shook her head firmly. "Not one. This is where I belong. With you." As darkness settled over the Dakota prairie, the Zimmerman family retreated into their warm cabin, closing the door against the night. Inside was everything they needed: love, family, purpose, and the deep contentment that comes from finding one's true place in the world. And it had all begun with a desperate journey through the snow, a moment of crisis that had led Hope and Hunter to each other, and to a love strong enough to withstand whatever challenges the frontier might bring.